So today we're going to look at a short screencast about thinking like a geographer. Geographers have many different concepts that they need to familiarize themselves with, and density and distribution are two of them. So geographers care about space. If you think about a map is just a drawing of space, a space. The arrangement of features within the space is called distribution. Density is the frequency with which something is distributed in that space. And if you ever look at a map, or if you go on Google Maps and do like satellite view of your neighborhood, you can see how many houses are in your neighborhood. The area that the map covers is space. The houses in that space are distribution, and how many houses in that space is the density or the frequency in which that house or the houses are distributed in that space. All right, distance decay is another concept geographers are concerned about. Barriers can prevent interaction. The farther away you are from someone, the less likely you are to interact. And you can think about this relatives. Do you have any relatives that live out of state? Relatives who live in a different country even? And the trailing off phenomenon of diminishing contact with those people is called distance decay. So if you have a grandma who lives next door and an aunt who lives in Colorado, you're going to have contact with that aunt much less than your grandma because of the distance between you two, and that is called distance decay. And one thing that is reducing distance decay is technology. If that same scenario happened 40 years ago, you are very unlikely to talk to that aunt very much because there is no technology that makes that easier to do like there is today. And that brings us to space-time compression. Because of that technology, connections between spaces is faster, so you can talk to that aunt more and more. The time has been compressed, so the time that you can talk to your aunt has been compressed because of technology. Information travels faster via networks. Transportation is a network, and the internet is a network. Over the past hundreds of years since the scientific revolution, we have witnessed a dramatic compression of space-time. And if you look at that globe on the right-hand side, it kind of helps you think about that. So when Columbus traveled the ocean's blue and stumbled upon Central America, it took him about 37 days to sail from Spain to the Caribbean. Now, Lindbergh in 1927 flew from Paris, France to New York, or I should say New York to Paris, in 33 hours. The Titanic could do it in 80 hours. Now, today, if you wanted to fly from New York to Paris, you could do it in approximately 5 or 6 hours. But thanks to technology, you could email somebody in Paris within seconds. Space-time compression is the solution to distance decay. So let's talk about that aunt again that we were discussing earlier. 40 years ago, the distance decay between you and your aunt who live in Colorado was pretty significant. But due to technology, being able to text, email, call, that space-time is compressed and distance decay is at a minimum. Maps, of course, if you're talking about geography, maps are very important. There are small-scale maps and large-scale maps. Small-scale maps, even though it seems like they would be talking about a smaller map, we're actually talking about a much larger area. And a large-scale map shows a much smaller area but much more detail. Diffusion. Diffusion is another concept that geographers really concern themselves with. Diffusion is how a cultural characteristic moves about in a population. We're looking at a map of a cultural phenomenon on what you call soda or pop or Coke. bubbly drink. In Minnesota, we tend to call it pop. And in the East and the West, they tend to call it soda. But if you live in Georgia or Alabama or Arkansas, they call all of it Coke. It doesn't matter if you drink it Sprite, Mountain Dew, Pepsi. They call it Coke for some reason. I'm not sure why. And how that moves around is called diffusion. So culture. Culture is another concept that human geographists concern themselves with. And a culture is everything about how you live that doesn't have to do with biology. It's what distinguishes us from nature, from other animals, and my culture distinguishes me from other people around the world. And that human activity changes the natural landscape. So this is a picture of Tokyo and how culture in Tokyo has shaped the landscape there. So relocation diffusion is how we talk about culture and how it's carried as people migrate. So if you go to New York or San Francisco, they both have a very prolific Chinese neighborhoods. It's called Chinatown. Both San Francisco and New York both have a very nice Chinatown. And that phenomenon starts when we have a mass migration from another country like China, and they tend to congregate in certain neighborhoods in large cities. And they bring their culture with them. And in Chinatown in New York, that culture has spread throughout many parts of New York, not just in Chinatown. So because people relocated from China and settled in parts of the United States, that's called relocation diffusion or relocation cultural diffusion. So expansion diffusion is just diffusion of culture through the expansion of that culture. And it comes in three different types. First type of expansion diffusion is hierarchical, or moving from a node of power or authority, and it could be a political leader or a religious leader. And on this picture here, we have Pope Francis and Donald Trump, who is the president currently. And even in the upper right-hand corner, we have Cardi B. They're both very powerful and culturally relevant people. And the culture they spread is through hierarchical diffusion. They are in a place of power, and if somebody sees them doing something culturally appropriate, it might be copied by others. Contagious diffusion, rapid and widespread. And this gets its name because it is culture that spreads rapidly like a virus or a bacteria, a contagious cultural diffusion. As its name suggests, contagious diffusion occurs when a particular characteristic is rapidly transmitted throughout the population. Memes are a good example of cultural diffusion or contagious diffusion. The iPhone, contagious diffusion. And a lot of times contagious diffusion is temporary. It can be a pop cultural icon. It can be something that comes and goes quickly. Another one, this is right here, the spread of Catholicism throughout Europe. That happened pretty quickly in the 5th century, and that can be another type of contagious diffusion. Our third type is stimulus. Expands on an idea or material good already in existence. So it's when an original concept is changing to accommodate other areas in the world. Here are a couple of good examples. So right in the middle there, we have the Maharaja Mac, and that is it's a chicken sandwich in India, and it's an example of how a stimulus diffusion is takes a concept from America and changes it to be more culturally appropriate in India. Another good example is, again, Christianity or other religious icons. Now, Christianity spread from the Middle East throughout Europe and the rest of the world, but it changed significantly over time and space from Catholicism or the original Christianity to Protestantism, Lutheranism, Methodists, and other types of Christianity. It changed to meet the needs of those people. So that's another form of stimulus